Ask Ceann Comhairle. And Minister, thank you for bringing this bill, and it's obvious the amount of work that you've done in the Seanad in relation to it. I think it's a really, really important and timely piece of legislation, and I commend you for your work on it. I think it's a piece of legislation that has been needed for some time. It's clear from our own politics, from our own regulation of politics, which is, I suppose, what we see most frequently, but from our conversations with parents, with a whole range of different actors, with schools, the need for regulation of social media. And I respect all of the points that have been made about freedom of expression and the right to freedom of expression. Freedom of expression is not and never has been an absolute right, not in this jurisdiction, not in any other jurisdiction. And the points that are made by the ICCL and others who raise concerns about censorship and freedom of expression are noted, but I don't ever hear those same organisations standing up for infringements on people's privacy or infringements on the democratic process or on democratically elected people either, who have suffered at the hands of unfettered freedom of expression either. And it would be nice to see a little bit more balance in that dialogue that respects, I suppose, some of the players on the pitch who are actually trying to engage in the democratic process, protect freedom of expression more broadly, and indeed protect the democratic process itself just by their very turning up and participating. And the reason I raise that in particular is because in the Gender Equality Committee last week, which of course is there to implement the recommendations of the Citizens' Assembly, recommended by the 100 citizens who did huge work on this, a big piece of that work is about women in politics and about women in public life more generally. And we had Professor Vaughan Galligan, among many other notable experts in front of that committee, but who noted in particular the insidious impact on democracy and democratic processes of social media, and in particular of unregulated social media, and the in particular effect of that on women and minorities, as Deputy Pringle and other deputies have pointed out. And the concern that we have generally of enhancing and increasing women's participation in politics and in public life as a measure of our representative chamber, as a measure of the success of our representative chamber, and how off-putting the social media abuse that we have all experienced, male or female in this House, how off-putting that can be for anyone to come into politics. But in particular, I think because it is obvious that it has been targeted at women in a different way, and I don't know that there are many of us that might dispute that, that it has been targeted at women in a slightly different way, or perhaps the nature of it is slightly different in respect of women, that it represents yet another barrier to getting more women into politics. And so that was a particular feature of our debate in the Gender Equality Committee last week, and so I think it's important to highlight it here. And when you look at the responsiveness of social media companies in practice to issues that are raised, I have to say in my own experience, without naming any of the companies, Ask Ceann Comhairle, but at least two of them, the response is just appallingly poor to issues that are raised, whether they're complaints made through their own channels, whether they're complaints made more directly, whether they're complaints made through other actors of the state. The timeliness and the quality of response is really genuinely poor. And I remember possibly about a year and a half ago, one of the social media companies came to us with an idea in respect of the takedown facilities. And of course, if something is put up about a politician or indeed any other person that has important reputational effect, the most important thing is to simply have it removed. Damages are not necessarily a remedy or any other sort of remedy. It's not a real remedy. It's about protecting the individual in the very moment. And their suggestion was that the individual could go to the High Court at whatever time of the day, presumably have the fees or the access to be able to do that, the access to lawyers at whatever time of the day, because social media happens at every time of the day, to get an injunction or to get a piece of relief from the High Court, to come back to that social media company, show them that from the High Court, and then the social media company would have a good old think about whether or not they would then take down the piece. But sure, by then the damage is done. And it just goes to show really how disconnected, and I think how either they don't understand, which I don't believe, they don't understand or they don't care about the impact that these things can have on the reputations of individuals. And that's why this balancing piece of legislation that you have introduced is so important. It's important because it provides that counterweight to a tool for freedom of expression that is huge positivity but must be regulated, and a tool for regulating those whose platforms are used to do that. And so I hear these points about freedom of expression, but even freedom of expression is a balanced right. It is not an absolute right, and which has gone too far in respect of the damage that can be done to individuals and to systems such as the democratic system as a consequence of the very, very small number of people and entities that use it so negatively and so wrongly. I think as well, Minister, I'd like to hugely congratulate you and thank you for the work that you've done in respect of the independent complaints mechanism. And I know that's something that you gave great thought to and that you had an expert group consider. Again, it speaks to the timeliness of being able to respond and for people to be able to respond. And I know that you're going, and my understanding is that you're going to introduce it in respect of children, minors first, as I understand it, along the Australian model, and then assess whether that can be rolled out more further. And I think that's exactly the right approach to take. And I noted that Safe Kids, who's a great organisation who work with children and parents in schools right across the country to provide better online safety training, support to parents who find their children in difficulties. I know that was one of the key recommendations from their study and their report just 2 weeks ago, where they had interviewed 4,500 young people and their parents about their social media use, their internet use, and the difficulties that they had faced. And the difficulties that parents in particular faced on behalf of protecting their children were where issues of bullying came up on Snapchat or on other YouTube videos that were being shared and linked throughout WhatsApp groups or different platforms that the children were using. And where those were either directly related to a child or were being used to continue bullying activity through online platforms. And the most important thing for those parents, again, were not some remote remedy down the line, some remote damages or some remote solution down the line. It was the protection of their child that night and the child's distress and the child's emotional well-being. And these are concepts that in other debates we speak about very frequently. We talk about mental health, we talk about the protection of children, we talk about removing bullying, we talk about all of these different things. But what's the mechanism? If it's your child at 7:30 on a Tuesday evening to stop whatever is happening that is exacerbating their distress. And the only thing is just getting it down quickly and enabling the child to get on with things rather than it growing and growing as these things do. And that's what that independent complaints mechanism offers, the opportunity for social media companies to have to respond quickly or else for it to be taken up with the Online Safety Commissioner. It provides pressure on them, not on the parent, not on the state. And I think that the behavioural effect for social media companies by introducing this mechanism will be to devote some of their very considerable and welcome but very considerable resources to dealing with things quickly instead of getting the sort of nonsense responses that you get, that even elected members of this House get in response to complaints of very serious natures that are simply not responded to. I don't care whether I get a response or not. I big and ugly and get on with things. But in respect of that child on a Tuesday night at 7:30, that parent needs a response for that child. And I think the step that you've taken with the independent complaints mechanism really offers that. And I think that the social media companies should be on notice that they're going to be expected to behave differently in respect of complaints that are raised, particularly with children where they are so particularly vulnerable. I think as well, and other deputies have referenced this, the question of the algorithms and the way in which they're driven. And it's so easy to test, it's so easy for any person to test, but there is no question but that they are driven by negativity. There are negativity-driven algorithms. There's simply no question about that. And we have I hope through this new piece of legislation, through the opportunity of the creation of the Commission, a better opportunity to understand and challenge and question that in a real way that provides a better balance to what's available on the internet more generally and media content generally. But look, I want to congratulate you and thank you for this piece of work. I wish you well throughout the rest of the Houses and thank you in particular for that independent complaints mechanism, because I think it is genuinely the practical difference that parents can reach to, as I said, Tuesday at 7:30 to protect their children, and without it I don't know what they would have continued to do in trying to manage social media bullying of their children. Thank you.